Welcome to Are You Ready for Your Next Challenge? WSET Spirits Qualifications Uncovered. I am Denise Bourne, Account Development Manager for Americas East and the Caribbean with WSET Global, and I will be your host for this session. Let's get started by understanding what is WSET, what do we do, and how do we do it? Established in 1969, WSET is the foremost and global provider of wine, sake, and now the leader in spirits qualifications. We offer 4 progressive levels of study through a network of course providers in more than 70 countries and translated into multiple languages. So, why are WSET qualifications relevant to you and your career? With the global boom in spirits, in a crowded marketplace ruled by tough competition, it's never been more important to stand out. Professionals can use WSET qualifications to do just that, gaining a deeper understanding of the fantastic world of distilled beverages. WSET equips students to look beyond the brands to understand the base materials and production choices that define a spirit's category, aroma, and flavor profile. Now, for a bit of housekeeping, please note that you can post any questions you may have in the live Q&A box during this session. Also, we would love to know which countries our audience is joining us from, so please let us know in the chat box. Now, let's meet our in-house spirits experts, Liam, Rob, and Charlie. Please introduce yourselves to the audience, gentlemen.
Starting with me. Thanks, Denise. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Liam Scandrett, and I'm UK's Spirits Business Development Manager. I suppose I'm a walking, talking example of how a WSET qualification can help someone in their career. When I was bartending, I wanted to learn as much as I could, but I also took pride in sharing what I'd learned with colleagues and guests. I was, and still am, really interested in flavour and how spirits production choices influence style and flavour found in the glass. Essentially, I was always asking the question, like, why does it taste like that? I'd done all the typical brand and category trainings, but they weren't often getting to the heart of that question. So I went to study my WSET Level 2 in spirits back in 2011. And that really kind of set me on a journey of discovery that I'm still on, frankly. From there, I went on to work for a host of major spirits brands. Had the opportunity to travel and talk to thousands of people about the thing I'm most passionate about and a whole range of spirits. And I've been in my role at the WSET since November 2016. I work with all of our spirits partners and educators in the UK.
Hi.
Next up, we have Charlie.
Jumping the gun, Denise, as usual.
That's okay.
Typical. Yeah, hi, my name is Charlie McCarthy. I'm obviously from Ireland, but I've been living and working in the UK for 20 years, working in the bar industry for the last 15. Started off as a bartender, got into cocktails, got in as you do. If you're in bartending, you want to be getting into cocktails. I ended up moving more towards kind of events and brand representation, working for grants, a bit of time for Cardi, and then I moved into consultancy. And I was very passionate about service, but I think there's 2 parts of service: making the guests feel really good and knowing what you're doing. And so for me, that's where WSET started coming in. I really wanted to know. There's a lot of people who might be kind of like coming out at the time with things across the bar that weren't exactly accurate. So WSET education was a really way for me of separating the wheat from the chaff, as it were, if that's not too much of a barley metaphor. And I ended up working for international hotel groups as a consultant and specialising in Irish whiskey for obvious reasons, what's in my glass. And I joined WSET about a year ago as Business Development Manager for Spirits for EMEA.
Oh, how do you follow those two, Denise? I don't know. So, hi everyone, my name is Rob McCackey. I'm the Senior Commercial Development Manager for the Americas, but originally a Brit as well. So I started out working in bars in London back in the mid-90s, had the fortune of living and working throughout Spain, Hong Kong, Abu Dhabi, and for the last 10 years I've been in the US. And like the guys, I mean, if you think back to the dark ages of booze in the 90s, there really wasn't much out there in the way of information. You know, I mean, I remember the days of Drink Boy and late night forums of people kind of discovering things for the first time. So I think we've come a long way in the last 25 years, and it's I think back to my first WSET qualification was back in 2007. So it's great to be a part of the team and to share WSET with the world. So welcome everybody.
Lovely. Perfect seg into the next topic, which is our qualifications, because all three of you guys mentioned that at some points of your career, you leaned into the more formal structure of education. So why don't we talk a little bit about our spirits qualifications, starting with level 1, Liam.
Yes, I'll start and give you a little brief overview of the level 1 awarding spirits, which is for individuals new to the subjects. It's a qualification that offers kind of a real hands-on introduction to the world of spirits, and it is very much an introduction. Students explore the main styles and types of spirits through their senses, through sight, smell and taste, and develop an understanding of some of those key factors that affect flavour and aroma. Going back to what I was saying earlier, that's really at the nub of what WSET qualifications are about. Students study those key principles of spirits production through 4 key stages. Those main types and styles, as they say, the flavours, the factors rather that are affecting their flavour, how to serve and store spirits, and importantly, and this is something I know the guys are going to go on to talk about a little bit more, how to properly describe spirits using our systematic approach to tasting. That SAT, as it's abbreviated, is a key pillar of all of our courses across wine, spirits and sake. It's really the vehicle that we use to underscore theory and demonstrate different production choices and how they influence flavour. Level 1 is studied in the classroom over 6 hours or online, usually over about 4 weeks. It's also available in 10 languages.
Good stuff. Now, Charlie, tell us about level 2.
Level 2 is interesting because level 2 is where I started off. If you've been working in a bar for a year or two, level 2 is really where you want to be starting in your studies. And the purpose behind level 2 is to give you kind of deeper understanding of the production methods that are at play in making spirits and liqueurs, and how those choices that the distiller or blender makes are going to affect the spirit in the glass. Again, it's all underpinned by the 4 stages of production: the selection and processing of raw materials, choices that are made during fermentation, during distillation, and after distillation. And just to give you a little flavour, this is the textbook, and you get to do kind of like I think inside a column, that sort of thing. And then, of course, the systematic approach to tasting goes into a lot more detail. The systematic approach to tasting card, and you have descriptors on the back in our lexicon. The great thing about the systematic approach, that essentially, no matter where you are in the world, it gives you a common language to communicate flavour. Because flavour really comes down to the appreciation of flavour and professional tasting comes down to 2 aspects. One is actually appreciating, and the other is communicating. And so you might have the best nose in the world, but if you're not using the language and a common lexicon that other people are using, maybe they don't understand what you mean by those words. So it's really a fantastic way of communicating with fellow bar professionals. And that's level 2.
Great. And Rob.
Hi. So Charlie had props. I mean, I don't have props. My bookshelf always looks like this, by the way. I mean, this is just where these books sit. So let's talk a little bit about level 3. So, and I think what is a fundamental facet of what we do at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust that I think sets us apart, and it's that we don't teach people kind of just facts. We don't teach people how to learn, regurgitate facts. We teach people how to think. And I think that's a really important skill set. And through levels 1 and 2, we're giving you some factual foundation, and we're giving you some skills like being able to compare and contrast and describe. But what we wanted to do with our level 3 spirits qualification was to help people develop those critical thinking skills to be able to not only understand why, but the how, and to be able to explain things. And we do that through teaching some fundamental skills like the principal factors involved in spirits production and how that influences style, quality, flavor, some of the key labeling terms, some of those legislated terms, and the key production choices that a distiller has where he has an opportunity to influence the final distiller. And I think once you have those skill sets, you can really take that and use it for any spirits category. And it's really exciting that we get to talk about categories like baijiu and shochu and soju. And all of this is underpinned, obviously, with our systematic approach to tasting, which is not just kind of a grid with how to be able to write a tasting note, but it's really about how to write a quality assessment and understand why a spirit tastes the way it does, and how does that impact quality? And what are those decisions? What are those relatively objective criteria that we can use to assess quality? And it's, for me, the key, and it was great that we were nominated for a Spirited Award, and to be one of those finalists there, and we were up against some stiff competitions, and congratulations to Brad Parsons, who won that award. But it's really exciting for me that we get to write what is fundamentally a textbook, but in a layman's language. And it's having something that's brand agnostic, that people can approach wherever they're from, whatever they do, and it's easy to absorb and digest. Thank you, Charlie. Look at that. Here's one that I made earlier. So that's our level 3.
The system.
It's our newest qualification, and obviously the zombie apocalypse has slowed down our rollout of that globally, but it is available in key markets. And if you'd love to know more about any of our qualifications, you can check out WSETglobal.com or reach out to us personally through our booth here at Tales of the Cocktail this week.
Well, thank you for doing part of my job for me, Rob. That's appreciated. Feel free to also... Much appreciated.
Once a marketeer, always a marketeer. Okay.
Fair point. I also wanted to mention that our WSET also offers levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 awards in wine, and levels 1 and 3 in sake. And all 9 qualifications are also available via the WSET online classroom. And to Rob's point, if you want to find out more information about those qualifications, and specifically about our spirits qualifications, feel free to visit WSETglobal.com. Now, gentlemen, let's talk about the new and exciting Spirits Distilled by WSET podcast. Charlie, let's start with you. Can you please tell the audience when this new podcast is available and how they can listen to these sessions?
Yes, I've been looking forward to this. The cat is finally out of the bag. So WSET Spirits Distilled is myself and Rob and Liam getting experts from around the world to tell us their insights into spirits. And it is available today. Now, episode 1 is up, it's live, it's on all the usual platforms: iTunes, Spotify, Google, Amazon, Stitcher, and all of them basically. So go check it out, subscribe, listen. The first episode is up now, but and that's focusing on the idea of how do you taste spirits, and I'll let one of the other guys tell you a bit more about it. But I think Rob,
thank you, Charlie.
I know, sorry. It's, I think Rob wanted to Rob was going to tell us about why people would want to listen to this. Is that right?
I mean, I can talk about whatever you want me to talk about, Charlie. But, I think, this is something. Obviously, we have the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. It's no secret that for a long time wine was our raison d'etre, and it really is the last. It's decade or a little bit more that spirits has become more and more an important facet of what we do. And I know that Charlie, Liam, and myself, along with Nick King, who wrote our qualifications and is our product development guru, we've had these conversations about how to communicate with a wider audience beyond just what it is that's in our textbooks. And this podcast idea is something we've kicked around for a little while, and it's just exciting that it's come to fruition. And for me, it's an opportunity to get beyond what we teach in our materials. When you have a qualification that is taught around the world in multiple languages, the realities are that there's a lot of stuff you just have to leave out. And, we all have the kind of nerdy stuff that we want to talk about. And it's just not feasible in a class that you're trying to launch for thousands, if not tens of thousands of people around the world. So this podcast gives us an opportunity to have some of those conversations. And it also gives us an opportunity to uplift some of those lesser known voices and lesser known characters, which is the part that I find really exciting. So for instance, I'm working on an episode right now on still design and distillation, where I get to talk with some of the guys from St. Lucia Distillers, so Lennox Wilson and Ian John from St. Lucia Distillers. Big shout out to you guys. Also, some more well-known characters like Richard Sill from Four Square, and kind of getting some really deep insight into some of the production processes that go into making these spirits that we see around us every day. And beyond that, talking to the folks in academia, the scientists. I know Liam has created a really exciting episode with some flavor scientists that he'll tell you about, but really a chance to kind of showcase people beyond kind of the star bartenders and the brand ambassadors and the people who generally get the airplay, and really be able to kind of showcase them and get their input To Liam's point, we're all still learning. It doesn't matter how long we've been doing this. And to really have an opportunity to bring the experts front and center and to let them tell their own stories, I think is really key to what we wanted to do with this podcast. So, good. Liam, I'm going to hand it over to you. Here's the baton.
It's all mine now. Yeah, I think, you've made some really good points. And, rather than doing episodes on specific categories of spirits, which is the obvious thing to do, we wanted to look across category and really kind of some of those production choices that we see across category and category share in many ways. The variables within those stages are what's really interesting to us, and some of the points of view on those variables. And the podcast series starts and concludes with episodes on tasting spirits, which Charlie's alluded to, and quality assessment, which is obviously an important part of our qualifications too. Charlie hosts both of those episodes, and we hear from experts such as Elaine Duff from Duff on the Rocks, which will be a name known to many, as well as Dawn Davies, Master of Wine from Speciality Drinks, as well as bartenders such as Chucky Tom, Julian DeFerrell, and Christina Vieira. I myself have had the pleasure of hosting the episode on yeast and alcoholic fermentation, which is a topic that I'm particularly passionate about. There I welcome Maggie Campbell, founder and head distiller at Privateer Rum, I'm sure a name that many of you know well, as well as Shane McNamara, who's a Master of Brewing Science and Technical Manager at AB InBev. As is often the case with Maggie and Shane, the conversation got pretty geeky pretty quickly, so definitely tune into that one. We actually had to cut it down significantly to fit into a audio podcast format. There is a lot and lots of geeky stuff in there. I've also had the privilege of hosting an episode on adding flavour, which Rob's alluded to. I speak to a host of producers about their various techniques with distillation and maceration, but I think one of the less heard from voices on that episode is a guy called Tom Gibson, who's a flavour architect. He creates flavour compounds for use in flavoured spirits and liqueurs and other alcoholic beverages. So, yeah, really interesting to get his viewpoint on a pretty well discussed category of spirits as well. Charlie, you've probably got a few favourite bits you want to tell us about as well.
Yeah, I mean, besides just talking to people like Elaine and Dawn and Julian and Chucky and Christina, everybody kind of really interested with them sharing their techniques of tasting. As I mentioned before, my favorite category is whiskey. Maturation is a huge part of that. And one of the episodes we do a super deep dive into maturation, talking to Laura Hemi from Rowan Co Distillery in Dublin. We talked to Asha Chocolingam from India, from Amrit, and we talked to Yuchen Zhang, who is an expert in baijiu and various different methods of baijiu production and what maturation means to all these different practices. And it gets super nerdy, but I think we're all here because we are super nerds about alcohol. But just to cut up the nerdiness, we do have these regular features. First feature is called Desert Island Drinks. And in episode 1, we get the man, the myth, the legend, that is Russell Burgess, to talk us through his favourite sipping spirit. If he could only have one mixing spirit, what would it be? And his guilty pleasure. And that's a repeating segment with various different guests throughout the season. And we close off each episode with a slightly more poignant insert, which is called A Letter to My Younger Self, where we get a veteran of the industry give advice to their younger selves. And in this first episode, we have the absolute master of the Scotch blend, Mr. Richard Patterson, sending a time capsule back to 50 years ago when he was starting off in the industry and giving himself advice about what to do and what to avoid along the way. So I think it's a really nice way to finish off an episode. Speaking of masters and legends, back to you, Denise.
Thank you very much, Charlie. And thank you, gentlemen, for speaking with us to the audience about WSET Spirits Qualifications and our No Spirits Distilled podcast. Thank you, Charlie, for providing an overview of what sounds like a very exciting first episode, which is now live and can be downloaded on Apple, Spotify, and Google podcast platforms. For more information, please visit wsetglobal.com/podcast with an S on the end. Remember, those of you who are with us, please, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them via the live Q&A box during the session. Okay, gentlemen, I'm going to bid you a little later, and not a goodbye as yet, because next up, we're going to have a tasting with Nick King, who is our head of product development for Spirits Qualifications and the author of the 2020 Spirited Awards nominated textbook, Understanding Spirits, Explaining Style and Quality. Take it away, Nick.
Can I just say to everybody quick before you start as well, Nick?
No, I haven't got much time left. Sure.
I know. The three of us are going to stick around in the chat, so if you want to talk to us in the chat, you can, and then we'll be in the partner booth afterwards if you want to talk some more. It was nice chatting with you all. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Okay, so as I have indicated, they've taken up a little bit of my time, but never mind. What I'm here to do today is to talk to you about tasting and our approach to tasting. There's nothing kind of greatly revolutionary about anything that we do, but it's just good to sort of show that you can really be concise and accurate with tasting, and you don't need to kind of like throw the kitchen sink at a tasting note with lots and lots of words. So what we're going to try today, and what I'm going to taste through using one of our more advanced systematic approach to tasting, it's SATs, is this, which you may not quite be able to make out on the camera, but it's the Privateer Navy Art. Now, the reason I've chosen that, it's quite special to me, this particular bottling, because I barreled it. But it's also, I've chosen it because it's quite rare. So I can try to show that actually I can communicate, hopefully, something that maybe not very many of you have had. So that's kind of the idea behind this. Now, as a quick full disclosure, the distiller there is a very good friend of mine. I've paid for this, so I'm not kind of doing this in any kind of way to try and kind of curry favour. It's just, I happen to think it's an excellent spirit, and hopefully this is quite a useful exercise. So tasting is relatively straightforward. We've got to use our senses. So the first thing we're going to do is look at it. There's very little you can tell from a spirit by looking at it. This is what we would describe as a medium amber. There's no other additives used at Privateer. That colour is all exclusively from the oak. So, but it's good to describe that, and just do bear in mind whenever you're tasting that you can remove colour, and you can also add colour. There are various different ways in which you can add colour, but that's not done here. So I'm not going to kind of spend a lot of time talking about that. Now, of course, the next thing we're going to do is we're gonna smell the spirit, and this really is where I really do need to stress that from my perspective, if I read a tasting note and someone's literally loaded up what I would describe as the word gun and fired it at the wall and it's just covered in all sorts of exotica, I can assure you that most of that is utter nonsense, because these things can't be tasted with that level of kind of accuracy, precision. It's just not possible. What's a much more effective approach is to think about where flavour comes from and aromas come from. And there are three main sources, particularly in a wood-aged spirit like this. There's going to be the raw material, which in this case is 100% molasses. You also get a lot of flavour from fermentation, and you do again in this. Now, sometimes that's esters, there are other things, but when you have a spirit that's fruity, almost like no fruit's been used, where's that come from? It's come from the yeast, it's come from fermentation. And then oak is the other very, very clear source of aroma in this. So what I'm going to do is I'll have a quick little smell of this. And the thing that's really, really striking about this is that I can pick out all of those individual bits. Now, you don't get everything in one go, and don't try and get everything in one go. It's just, it's a fool's mission. But what I can really smell in here is this really dense, concentrated toffee caramel brown sugar, which is from the molasses character. There's a really kind of lovely kind of raisin, ripe banana, cooked apple. So there's this kind of rich kind of mix of kind of like quite kind of concentrated fruit aromas. There's a little bit of fresh green apple in there as well, but it's really kind of, it pops out every now and again. It's not particularly, but it's much more this kind of cooked, really ripe fruits. And then we get to the wood, and it's really, this is 100% number 3 char new American oak. It's a single barrel, so I mean that's what it was, and it's really very, very precise. You've got the vanilla, you've got the cinnamon, and then you get this kind of slight cigar box, which is kind of a bit of a fancy reference, but there's kind of more of a cedar. There's something very perfumed in that wood, along with some cinnamon and some of the sweet spicing. So that's enough. I mean, that's quite a lot of words as it is, but I mean, anything much more than that, and you're probably just dealing in synonyms. But that's really enough for a note. Now, once I've prepared this all up, so this has been diluted ever so slightly because this is bottled at barrel strength. So when we look at this, we've got something that's dry. But the extraordinary thing about this is that even though it's got a very high strength to it, it has a warmth to it, but it's not hot or sharp or angular anyway. You can feel the wood grain, the wood tannin a little bit, and it gives it a really nice kind of feel, kind of grip to the texture, and this wonderful coating mouthfeel without ever being kind of excessively oily. This is completely dry, and the aromas all carry through on this finish, and this is a hugely long finish. It's a long finish in it's very complex, and when I'm looking for great complexity in a finish, I'm looking for aromas that keep re-emerging, fade, re-emerge, and kind of go backwards and forwards. It's that's really what I want to see in a finish. So that's a note. It's quite kind of concise. It's not particularly flowery. But what can we think about now about the conclusion? Well, when you're looking for a conclusion, you can just walk away and just say, I think that's lovely. You think, great, and that's enough. But really, if you want to have a little bit more of an analytical conclusion, we need to look at these components and why are they working well together. So there are some things that we tend to use, and this is what most people will ultimately tend to use. First things up is the balance, and there's a textural balance, and there's some really big components to work with here. The wood, never in any of this do you get kind of a bitterness, you don't get any astringency, you get a nice little bit of a grain to it, and that's really hard to achieve. You get this high alcohol, but you don't get high alcohol, but you don't get anything that's kind of harsh or sharp or burning. So you've got this really wonderful kind of texture, which has got a lovely oily feel, nicely rounded. So the textural balance is exceptional. The aromatic balance is exceptional. All of these individual qualities keep coming through. They're all big, they're all powerful, but they complement and work in such a precise and elegant way. What really is astonishing, and you can't read this, you can say as best you can, but the length on this and the precision of those aromas across the length is just astonishing. So you just keep getting these things and they never fade, and you don't get anything on the finish that kind of like becomes jarring or slightly awkward. So what you've ended up with is something that's intensely expressive. It tells you about the raw material, it tells you about how it's made, it tells you all sorts of things about this. This is so not generic, this is so precise, it's so detailed and so layered. And it's very easy when you have a spirit like that to just go, well, look, this is outstanding. Now, I can even probably compress that into a little bit more of a tighter set of sentences, but you don't really need to go massively overboard to really hopefully communicate why I think, I think quite reasonably, this is actually an outstanding spirit. So that, in a very, very, very quick way, is broadly speaking how we would generate a tasting note, how we would generate a quality assessment. And if you want to kind of learn more about how we go about doing that, because this has been a very, very quick gallop, do go to our website, wstglobal.com, and there you'll be able to look at where to study page, and you'll be able to find out various different providers around the world that will be offering these courses. So that's an important part of what we do, and hopefully that has been insightful.
Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much for going through that tasting of Navy Yard, which is so yummy. And
no, it
ladies,
is.
It really is. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This concludes the WSET live session entitled, Are You Ready for Your Next Challenge? WSET Spirits Qualifications Uncovered. To our audience, please feel free to visit our digital booth or to book a phone call to speak with one of our in-house in-house experts about our spirits qualifications. You would have met Liam, Rob, Charlie, and Nick. They will be available throughout the week to answer any questions that you may have. I want to thank Charlie, Rob, Liam, and Nick for joining me today during the session. Thank you, audience, for being with us today. Until we can safely meet in person again, stay safe and cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, Denise.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
And
Cheers.
thank you to Chelsea from Towers who helped us stay on time. We appreciate you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Check us
Chelsea.
out in the booth.
Bye.
Peace out.
Bye.